Zitkalasa. Circa 1898, she founded the National Council of American Indians, exposed corrupt oil deals stealing native land, and wrote about boarding school horrors that America preferred buried. She did all of this before most women could vote. Winston Churchill moved to Tez. 1955, he had saved a civilization and was now watching people thank him for it. Churchill remained an MP until 1964, but never returned as Prime Minister. The teas were the only unguarded moment the cameras ever caught. Chester Higgins, Early Morning Coffee, Harlem. 1974. Harlem in 1974 was absorbing the fiscal crisis and the birth of hip-hop simultaneously. Higgins photographed the quiet between those forces. An early morning, a cup of coffee, a moment the city wasn't performing anything for anyone. Marilyn Monroe in costume test for All About Eve, March 21, 1951, of her first films of the decade, and already the camera was having difficulty distributing its attention evenly. The costume test photographs were promotional. The subject was not yet the subject. That was about to change permanently. German soldiers react to concentration camp footage. 1945 Allied forces made German civilians and soldiers watch the footage, so the claim of ignorance could never be made comfortably again. Some covered their faces. Some looked away. The camera recorded who could not look at all. The Great Seal Bug. 1945 Soviet school children presented the U.S. ambassador with a carved wooden seal as a gesture of friendship. It hung in his office for 7 years. Inside it was a listening device requiring no battery. Subscribe to British Gallery if you love history, and also subscribe if you live in the United States. Napoleon veteran in old uniform. May 25, 1858, he had fought for an empire that collapsed before he was 40. By 1858, the uniform no longer fit the world, only him. Someone asked him to put it on one more time, and he agreed. Kim Il-sung meets Anwar Sadat. May 1967, two future heads of state photographed together. One who would make peace with Israel, one who would build a dynasty of total control. The meeting produced nothing significant. The photograph is the entire record of what happened. Soviet and Japanese representatives after Khalkhin-Gol armistice. October 1, 1939, the battle ended with a decisive Soviet victory that convinced Japan to expand south rather than north into Siberia. The commemorative photograph was taken. The decision it reflected shaped the entire Pacific War that followed. Jewish American soldiers hold services in Goebbels' residence. March 18, 1945, they held Jewish religious services inside the former home of the man who ran Nazi propaganda. The war was 3 weeks from ending. The choice of location was not accidental. Nobody needed to explain what it meant. Sophia Loren kisses Sister Anna Maria. 1955, before the international stardom, before everything Hollywood built around her. She was simply a woman kissing her younger sister in 1955 with the ease of someone who hadn't yet been fully converted into a symbol. Omar Faridin Pasha, last Ottoman commander in Medina when the Ottoman Empire surrendered in 1918. Faridin Pasha refused to yield Medina for 72 days after the armistice. He finally surrendered in January 1919, the last Ottoman commander to accept defeat. The city had not fallen. He had simply run out of time. Roman legionnaires' shoe found near Saalburg, Germany. The leather survived 2,000 years beneath German soil, excavated near a military camp the legions built on the Rhine frontier. The soldier who wore it walked the edge of the known Roman world. The shoe outlasted the empire by 20 centuries. Ould Nail women, Atlas Mountains, Algeria, 1800s. In the Ould Nail tribe, women earned their own money, chose their own husbands, and owned their own land while Victorian Europe debated whether women should vote. The photographs were taken as colonial curiosities. The tribe was simply operating correctly. Marc Dutroux's discovery, Belgium, August 15, 1996. Behind a hidden concrete door in his basement, Belgian police found 2 girls barely alive. The investigation revealed corruption reaching into government. Belgium held its largest protest march in history demanding answers. Many questions remain officially unanswered. Aaron Woolen, aka Short E. Dangerously, born 1978, born with sacrilege genesis. He became a sideshow performer, DJ, and entertainer for over 20 years, appearing on National Geographic and Inside Edition. He built a career from exactly what the world told him was a limitation. Old Roman Bridge, Mosul, Iraq, 1940s and present. It stood for 2,000 years across the same river, while empires built around it. collapsed and were replaced by other empires. The 1940s photograph and the present one measure everything that changed around something that refused to. NASA Orion Artemis II crew splashdown, April 10, 2026. They returned from lunar orbit and splashed down at 7:07 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the first humans to travel to the moon's vicinity since Apollo 17 in 1972. 54 years between the departures. The ocean looked the same receiving them. Garment workers protest at Webster Hall, NYC. 1915, 4 years after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire killed 146 workers and 2 years after the International Ladies Garment Workers Union's historic strike, these women were still in the street demanding what the fire had already proven was necessary. Mukti Bahini guerrilla embraces companions. Dhaka, December 16, 1971. 9 months of war, up to 3 million dead, and then a ceasefire. This fighter held whoever was closest when the announcement came. Bangladesh was born that day. The embrace lasted seconds before history kept moving forward. Men in a dragster crossing into Fresno County, 1920. California in 1920 was still building the road infrastructure the automobile was demanding. These men crossed a county line in something that barely qualified as a vehicle and were photographed at the boundary of two places neither of them had driven to before. Budapest street corner, 1930s. Newspaper poster by Tibor Polya. The poster by Tibor Polya anchors this Budapest intersection in a specific week. News frozen mid-shout on a street corner while the city moved past it. The poster is the only thing in the frame that isn't moving. Often children after Amritsa violence. March 1947. Their mother was stabbed during communal riots 3 months before partition. The nurse holds the crying infant beside the wounded sibling. Between 200,000 and 2 million people died in the partition violence. The camera found these two. Actor Choi Moo-ryung and actress Kim Ji-mi arrested for adultery. 1962. South Korea criminalized adultery until 2015. These two were arrested and photographed in 1962 because the law required it. 53 years of prosecutions followed. The Constitutional Court struck it down. The law was always the photograph's actual subject. Dresden after Allied firebombing. 1945. 2 days of bombing in February 1945 destroyed one of Europe's most beautiful cities. The death toll remains disputed. Estimates range from 22,000 to over 100,000. The firestorm consumed everything that centuries of architecture had taken to build. Zomogod at football match, Warsaw, March 3, 1982. Poland was under martial law. The motorized reserves stood guard at a football match between Legia Warsaw and Dynamo Tbilisi, because in 1982 Poland, even sport required armed supervision. The quarterfinal went ahead regardless of everything standing outside it. Woodrow Wilson presides over Flag Day, 1914 on the same stage. Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan and a young Franklin Roosevelt, then Assistant Naval Secretary. 3 of the most consequential American political figures of the era shared one platform in 1914, 1 year before the war that would define all 3. Young Franklin Roosevelt with cousin Jean, Campobello. 1910. He was 28, healthy, and entirely unaware that 11 years later polio would permanently alter everything about how he moved through the world. The ease in this photograph belongs to a body that had not yet been tested. Soviet cosmonaut Sergei Krikalev stranded in space. 1991. He launched under one country and landed in another. The Soviet Union dissolved while he orbited. He spent 311 days in space waiting for a nation that no longer existed to bring him home. Kazakhstan eventually did. The woman with the handbag, Danuta Danielsson, Vaxjo, Sweden, April 13, 1985. A 38-year-old woman whose mother had survived a concentration camp swung her handbag at a marching neo-Nazi in a Swedish street. B-17G Wee Willie shot down. Stendal, Germany, April 8, 1945. Of 9 crew members, only the pilot survived. The aircraft broke apart over a German marshalling yard 3 weeks before the war ended. The pilot had seconds to decide. He was the only one with the decision available to him. Marine tosses phosphorus grenade at Sniper, Okinawa. April 1945. Okinawa was the last major Pacific battle. 82 days, 12,000 American dead, and up to 150,000 Okinawan civilian casualties. This Marine threw a grenade at a sniper, and someone photographed the arc. The war had 4 months left. Adult male, Andaman Islands. Crafting rope, 1890s. The Andaman Islands in the 1890s were both a British penal colony and home to indigenous communities the colonial administration photographed as anthropological specimens. This man was crafting something useful. The camera was collecting something else entirely. Anna Coleman Ladd fitting soldier with face mask, Paris. 1917 she sculpted new faces for men who had lost pieces of theirs in the trenches, painting the tin masks to match each man's complexion, hair color, and expression. She called her studio the American Red Cross Studio for portrait masks. Vatican Necropolis, 1950. Excavations under St. Peter's Basilica began in the 1940s under Pope Pius XII looking for St. Peter's tomb. They found ancient mausoleums dating to 100 AD. The first photograph of what lay beneath the world's most visited church looked like this. Brits celebrating Christmas in bomb shelter, London. 1940 the Blitz was destroying sections of London nightly. In the deep-level shelters, thousands organized sing-alongs and celebrated Christmas with whatever they carried down. The city above was burning. The photographs from below look almost festive. Dead Reds at Kalevankangas Cemetery, Finland. 1918 the Finnish Civil War killed 36,000 people, most of them Red prisoners who died in camps after the fighting ended. The White victory was total and the documentation of its aftermath was equally thorough and unapologetic. Female political prisoners, Evin Prison, Tehran. 1982 Evin Prison became synonymous with the Islamic Republic's treatment of political opponents after 1979. Manucha Degati photographed what the government preferred unseen. These women were imprisoned for their politics in a revolution that had promised them liberation. Bruno Barbie, students hurling projectiles, Paris. 1968 May 1968 on Boulevard Saint-Germain. Students threw cobblestones at police in a city that had been shutting down for weeks. Barbie moved through the smoke and documented both sides of the same rupture with equal attention and no visible preference. Yuri Mechetov, Sergei Parajanov, Tbilisi. 1980 he survived Soviet imprisonment on manufactured charges. By 1980 he was free, photographed in Tbilisi with the quiet intensity of someone who had outlasted a system designed to permanently silence exactly what he was. Berenice Abbott, portrait of the artist as a young woman. Negative C 1930 distortion C 1950 Abbott photographed herself around 1930 and returned to the negative 20 years later to apply a distortion technique. The result is a portrait that exists in 2 decades simultaneously, the same face processed by entirely different hands and intentions. Victor Jorgensen, refueling at sea before Operation Galvanic. 1943 Operation Galvanic was the assault on Tarawa and Makin in November 1943, among the bloodiest Pacific landings of the war. This refueling at sea was the last pause before the fleet entered what was waiting. Jorgensen recorded the calm before it. Gransel Fitz, telephone operators. 1940s hundreds of women worked switchboards simultaneously in the 1940s, connecting calls through a physical network of plugs, jacks, and voices. The job required memory, precision. Hero, Barclay Johnson and George Halley. 1968 Hero composed fashion and portrait photographs, as though they were paintings, controlling every element of light, position, and background with the precision of a filmmaker. This image of Barclay Johnson exists in 1968, but belongs to no specific decade visually. Roy de Carava, Sun and Shade. 1952 de Carava photographed Harlem's light the way other photographers photographed its poverty, as something specific and worth preserving entirely on its own terms. Sun and Shade in 1952 is a formal argument about what photography is allowed to find beautiful. Hero, Apollo 11 launch, 9:32 a.m., July 16, 1969. Hero was at Cape Kennedy at the exact second of liftoff and composed the Saturn VS departure with the same precision he applied to fashion and portraiture. The rocket didn't know it was being photographed by a master. The photograph knows. O. Winston Link with equipment for night flash photography. March 16, 1956. Link spent years photographing steam locomotives at night, building elaborate synchronized flash rigs across entire landscapes to capture what no natural light could reveal. He documented American steam railroads in their final years with equipment he essentially invented for the purpose. Sergei Eisenstein at an editing table. Circa 1924 to 1928, he invented montage theory, the idea that two images cut together produce a meaning neither contains alone. Battleship Potemkin changed cinema before most filmmakers understood what film could do. At the editing table, he looked like someone who knew exactly what he was building. Pascal Seba, baseball game at the Egyptian pyramids. February 9, 1889, Albert Spaulding's World Tour brought American baseball players to Egypt. They played a game in the shadow of the Great Pyramid. The Sphinx watched from the outfield. Seba pressed the shutter on the most improbable sporting venue in the history of the sport. Howard Clifford runs from collapsing Tacoma Narrows Bridge, November 7, 1940. The bridge had been nicknamed Galloping Gertie for months of visible oscillation before it finally collapsed. Clifford ran across the deck as the roadway twisted beneath him. Jim Bashford's photograph captured the sprint. The bridge fell into Puget Sound minutes later. Seattle police in Spanish flu masks. December 1918, the war had just ended. The flu that killed more people than the war was still running. Seattle officers wore Red Cross masks on duty in December 1918, the overlap between one catastrophe ending and another still moving through the city. Jack Mitchell, Paul Taylor and Betty DeJong in Scooterama. 1963. Paul Taylor's choreography in 1963 was already moving American modern dance somewhere academic critics hadn't mapped yet. Mitchell photographed the performance with the specific attention of someone who understood that what Taylor was doing deserved a visual record equal to the movement itself. John Moran, Transit of Venus, Honolulu. December 8, 1874. Scientists traveled to remote locations worldwide to photograph Venus crossing the Sun. The data would be used to calculate the out-sun distance. Honolulu in 1874 was one of the observation stations. John T. Daniels, First Airplane Flight, Kitty Hawk. December 17, 1903. Daniels had never used a camera before. Orville Wright set the exposure and asked him to press the shutter if anything happened. Something happened. The photograph Daniels accidentally took that morning is the most important accidental photograph in the history of technology. Thomas Hopka, Arnold Schwarzenegger flexing with ballerinas. Los Angeles, 1977. He was Mr. Olympia 6 times and in 1977 was still primarily known as a bodybuilder. The ballerinas posed beside him with the professional composure of people trained not to react to whatever stands next to them at the bar. Thomas Hopka, Arnold Schwarzenegger showing physique. Los Angeles, 1977. Hopka photographed Schwarzenegger the way he photographed athletes, as someone whose body was the argument and the evidence simultaneously. In 1977, nobody had yet decided what Schwarzenegger would become. The photographs suggest the body had already decided. André Coutts, Arm and Fan. 1937. Coutts composed from unexpected angles his entire career, finding geometry in bodies, furniture, shadows, and the objects people carry. The arm and the fan together in 1937 are not a portrait of a person. They are a portrait of a specific afternoon in a specific light. Abbas Muhammad Ali avoids punch from George Foreman. Zawiya, 4 a.m., October 30th, 1970. For the Rumble in the Jungle was fought at 4 a.m. Kinshasa time for American television. Ali used the rope-a-dope strategy he told nobody about. Abbas was there. The punch didn't land. 8 rounds later, Foreman went down. Helmut Newton, David Lynch and Isabella Rossellini. Los Angeles, 1988. Newton photographed power the way Lynch filmed it, with the surface entirely composed and something deeply unsettling just below. Lynch and Rossellini had just ended their relationship when this was taken. Newton understood exactly what he was photographing. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin salutes American flag, moon. July 21, 1969. Armstrong took this photograph, which is why he appears in almost none of the moon landings visual record. The man who stepped first is almost entirely absent from the images. Aldrin is there because Armstrong was behind the camera. A woman in her kitchen. 1914, the same year the First World War began. Someone photographed a woman in her kitchen, an interior so ordinary it requires no explanation. The war outside would eventually reorganize the kitchen too, through rationing, absence, and the specific hunger of waiting. The Great Molasses Flood, Boston, 1919. A storage tank containing 2.3 million gallons of molasses collapsed and sent a wave 15 feet high through Boston's north end at 35 miles per hour. 21 people died. The neighborhood reportedly smelled of molasses for decades afterward. Vintage can of M1911 pistols. Jackie the Baboon, private in the South African Army. 1924. A chimpanzee was officially enlisted. assigned a service number, and dressed in uniform. He attended roll calls and reportedly saluted officers. The South African military in 1924 processed the paperwork without apparent difficulty. The uniform fit. The rank was official. New York policemen hanging from girder. 1920 construction workers and maintenance crews in 1920 New York worked at heights without safety equipment that hadn't yet been invented as a requirement. A policeman hung from a steel girder for reasons the photograph doesn't explain. The city below was entirely unaware of him. Dog hugged by owners, Ireland, August 22, 1883. Glass negative. The glass negative preserved a dog between two people who loved it in 1883 with the same uncomplicated affection that dogs inspire in every century equally. The pose is identical to 10,000 photographs taken since. The dog looks exactly the same. American soldier holds jungle centipede. Vietnam War. The centipede is enormous. The soldier's expression suggests he has made a calculation about the creature that he is not entirely certain was the correct one. Vietnam's jungle ecology was its own adversary, entirely separate from the official one. Family poses with first car, Ford Model T, Wisconsin. 1922. The Model T had been in production since 1908 and by 1922 had made car ownership possible for families that previously couldn't consider it. The family posed beside their Model T the way earlier families posed beside their first houses. U.S. Marine with Colt M1895 machine gun on elephant. 1914. The photograph exists because someone in 1914 looked at an elephant and a machine gun and concluded this was a reasonable mounting solution. The logic required by military operations in certain terrains was occasionally spectacular in its improvisation. Fort Blunder, U.S. fort built in Canada. 1816. The United States surveyed the wrong location and built a fort to defend itself from Canadian invasion on Canadian soil. When the error was discovered, the fort was abandoned. It was eventually completed decades later, after the border was properly established. Lumber Yard, Seattle. 1937. Seattle's economy in 1937 was built on timber, shipping, and Boeing. The Depression had hit all three. The lumber yard in this photograph represents the industry that built the Pacific Northwest and was now rebuilding itself alongside the rest of the country's slow recovery. Traveler with ritualistic bear, Ainu people, Japan. 1940s. The Ainu of Hokkaido kept bears as sacred animals, raised from cubs in the village, then ritually sacrificed in a ceremony called Iamanti to send the bear's spirit back to the gods. The traveler holding the bear in this photograph is touching something with a cosmology attached to it. British war vehicles at Hamburg scrapyard. May 1958. The tanks and armored vehicles that defeated Germany sat piled in a Hamburg scrapyard 13 years after the war ended, still waiting to be broken down. Britain had won the war and couldn't afford to keep the equipment that won it. Greyhound bus station waiting room with TVs, Los Angeles. 1969. Television sets in a bus station waiting room in the year of the moon landing. People waited to go somewhere slowly while the Century moved at a different speed entirely outside and above them. The TVs showed what the Century was doing. Dad shows off skills to daughter. Melbourne. 1940. Australia in 1940 was already sending troops to North Africa. This father performed something impressive for his daughter in a Melbourne backyard while the war existed somewhere beyond the fence. The daughter's face suggests he succeeded completely. Chinese student displays college prep materials. She spread every practice book, worksheet, and exam guide across the floor and photographed the entire stack. The Chinese university entrance examination, Gaokao, is among the most competitive in the world. The paper on the floor measured what getting in cost her. German soldier lights cigarette with flamethrower. World War II. He tipped the flamethrower toward his cigarette with the casual confidence of someone who has been working with fire long enough to have stopped being afraid of specific quantities of it. The cigarette lit. That was the point. Chinese Catholics defend church from Boxers. 1899. The Boxer rebellion targeted foreign influence and Christian converts simultaneously. Chinese Catholics armed themselves to protect their church from Chinese nationalists, a civil conflict running inside the larger foreign one. The photograph documents the most complicated possible position in the uprising. Anne Frank ice skating, Amsterdam. Winter 1941. Months after this photograph, she would be banned from public parks entirely. Within a year, her family would go into hiding. Anne Frank is skating here with the ordinary freedom of a child who doesn't yet know what is being prepared for her. Chinese soldier with sword, Defense of the Great Wall. 1933, Japan had invaded Manchuria in 1931. By 1933, Chinese forces were defending the Great Wall with swords because adequate modern equipment hadn't reached them. The photograph is evidence of the gap between the weapons the soldiers deserved and the ones they had been given. Jackie Collins at home. July 1956, she was 19 years old and had already decided exactly what she was going to be. The pose, the setting, the direct look into the camera. Hollywood Wives was still 27 years away. The confidence in this photograph arrived first. Katie Sandwina at RBBB Circus. Circa 1910s, she lifted her husband above her head with one hand during performances. At 5 feet 11 inches and 210 pounds of muscle, she challenged any man in the audience to match her strength. Almost none could. She billed herself as the world's strongest woman. The title was not disputed seriously. Marilyn Monroe at Malibu Beach Party. Circa 1945-47. Kodachrome before the platinum hair, before the studio contract, before everything Hollywood built around her. She was Norma Jean at a beach party in a black jacket, photographed in Kodachrome at an age when the camera was still discovering her rather than confirming what it already knew. Senior citizens protest inflation. October 1973, the OPEC oil embargo had just begun, inflation was accelerating, and senior citizens on fixed incomes were the first to feel it precisely. They marched in October 1973 with signs that were correct about what was happening and entirely ignored by the policies responding to it. Woman protesting wealth inequality. North Carolina. Circa 1930s, the Depression had taken everything from some people and nothing from others. She stood in a North Carolina street with a sign in the 1930s making an argument that the decade had converted from opinion into statistical fact. The photograph survived. The argument has not been resolved. Betty Page on a farm. Safety Kodak film. 1950s, before the iconic pin-up photographs, before Irving Klaw, before the Senate investigation. She was photographed on a farm in an early Kodak frame with the uncomplicated ease of someone who hadn't yet become the subject of a moral panic. The ease was already entirely there. Marilyn Monroe at Paradise Cove, Malibu. November 1945, not yet signed to Blue Book, not yet renamed. Photographed at a Malibu beach in November 1945 with the light doing what it always did to her face regardless of whether anyone had decided to pay attention to it yet. Autochrome of Lady Watching Waves. Circa 1910s, the autochrome process rendered the sea and the figure watching it in the specific color palette of hand-tinted glass, something between a photograph and a painting. She watched the waves. The camera watched her. Neither knew the other was recording something. Acrobat sisters Ginger and Juanita Moody. 1950. Kodachrome. They posed for a fan in 1950 in the full colors of Kodachrome, a medium that treated the body as geometry and the circus as a world with its own specific light. The sisters performed together. The photograph performs alongside them. Vamp Iowa and Tor Johnson on set of Plan 9 from Outer Space, November 1956, considered the worst film ever made for decades, a title it wore as a kind of honor. Vamp Iowa and Tor Johnson rested between takes on a set that cost almost nothing and produced something cinema has never stopped discussing, somehow. Tiger Woods caddy Mike Fluff Cohen checks wind. 1997 Masters. Woods was 21 years old and about to win the Masters by 12 strokes, the largest margin in tournament history. His caddy checked wind direction with a cigarette. The smoke drifted. The caddy noted which way. The rest of the week followed accordingly. Michael Jackson, 1978. Before major changes, he was 19 years old and the Jackson 5 had just given way to his solo career. Off the Wall was 1 year away. In 1978, he looked exactly like what he was, a young man from Gary, Indiana, about to become something the world had no prior category for. Hillary Clinton on her wedding day. 1975, she was 27, a Yale Law graduate, and marrying a man who would eventually become President of the United States. She would spend the next 5 decades being photographed. This is one of the few photographs where the camera found her before history had decided what to do with her. Arnold Schwarzenegger with Wilt Chamberlain and Andre the Giant. 1983, 3 of the most physically extraordinary human beings who ever lived stood together on the set of Conan the Destroyer in 1983. Chamberlain was 7 feet 1 inch. Andre was 7 feet 4 inches. Schwarzenegger at 6 feet 2 inches was the smallest man in the frame. First-class food service, airlines, 1960s. Kodachrome, the golden age of aviation, served hot meals on China at altitude. a full service that airlines have spent 60 years systematically dismantling in pursuit of efficiency. The Kodachrome slides preserve colors that no longer belong to air travel. Astronaut Slayton and cosmonaut Leonov, Apollo-Soyuz project. 1975, an American astronaut and a Soviet cosmonaut shook hands in orbit 3 years after the Vietnam War ended and 16 years before the Soviet Union dissolved. The handshake was real. The politics that made it possible lasted approximately as long as the mission. Transformation of Utrecht, Netherlands, 1982 and 2026, 4 to 4 years between the two frames. The city reorganized its streets, removed cars, and expanded cycling infrastructure across 4 decades of deliberate planning. The 2026 photograph documents what a city looks like when it commits to changing and then actually does it. Happy Farm Family, Sheridan County, Kansas. 1939, the 3 girls wear flour sack dresses their mother sewed, a specific thrift that became a Depression-era institution. Kansas in 1939 was emerging from the Dust Bowl. The family is smiling inside a decade that didn't give most families many reasons to. Andres Toma, lost WW2 POW. Released 2000, captured in 1945 and locked in a Soviet asylum for speaking gibberish. A Slovak visitor in 2000 recognized the language as Hungarian. Toma had been imprisoned for 55 years because nobody had stopped to identify the language of a man who never stopped speaking it. English schoolboys stunned by Steve Cody's 1964, a physique model stands before a group of English schoolboys who have collectively lost the ability to compose their faces. 1964, Britain had not yet encountered the specific vocabulary of bodybuilding presented this directly. Their expressions are a document of encounter with the unfamiliar. Space Shuttle atop 747 with Concorde in background. 1983, the photograph cannot be taken again. Both the Space Shuttle and Concorde have been retired. The 2 most technologically ambitious vehicles of their era crossed each other's paths in 1983, and someone pressed the shutter at exactly the right second. Plane half embedded in South Tower, September 11, 2001. The photograph documents what physics did when a fully fueled airliner traveling at nearly 600 miles per hour met a steel and glass structure. The geometry of the impact is visible in the frame. The scale of what followed is not containable in any single image. Debbie Fields, founder of Mrs. Fields Cookies, June 19, 1983. She opened her first store in 1977 at 20 years old and was told by a business consultant that the idea would fail. By 1983, she had hundreds of locations. The cookies were real. The advice was not worth taking. Dan Aykroyd, late 1970s. Saturday Night Live had just established itself. The Blues Brothers were about to happen, and Ghostbusters was 5 years away. Dan Aykroyd in the late 1970s existed at the exact midpoint between what he had built and what he was about to build. Rasputin with Tsarina Alexandra and children. 1908, he was brought to the palace because he appeared to help the hemophiliac Tsarevich Alexei. The Tsarina trusted him completely. The Tsar tolerated him reluctantly. Russian aristocracy despised him openly. He was murdered in 1916. The dynasty survived him by 14 months. Cretan child laborers at Knossos excavation. 1902, Sir Arthur Evans excavated Knossos with local child labor. Standard archaeological practice in 1902, which is to say, the standards of 1902 applied to both the workers and the ethics governing them. The Minoan palace they helped uncover was 3,500 years old. The children were not paid accordingly.